What is up, Flyers fans? I'm back. I know I was trying to do a video a week, and I had a video for you last week. And honestly, upon further review, I didn't like it. Um, I didn't have enough stats. I didn't. I was just kind of talking from my heart, which is obviously what you need to do sometimes in analytics. But I didn't have enough, points to back up the fact that I was saying I was just kind of dookying on a person, and I didn't want to post that because I didn't believe in the content. But this week I have something I'm very passionate about, and we're going to talk about it. But first, I want to run through the last 2 weeks of what's been going on with our favorite hockey team, the Philadelphia Flyers. So I missed a little bit of time. I'm just going to jump back to the Golden Knights game, just to touch on real quick. Winnipeg was a good win. The Golden Knights game, super winnable game, kind of a heartbreaker. Columbus, for me, was worse. Columbus was a game that they should have won, it felt like. And, they did everything they could to lose that game. But Sergei Bobrovsky, maybe the biggest mistake of Paul Holmgren's tenure was trading him away. And, he just stood on his head, and Columbus found the net. Cam Atkinson had a nasty game, so you can't really fault it too much. Should have beat Carolina. Beating Washington was at that moment the best win of the season and the most important win of the season, especially so handedly. And then last night or I guess Tuesday night when this posts, they lost to Detroit, and that was a heartbreaker. It just goes back to one of the problems I feel like this team has had damn near all season, and that's just that they don't play a 60-minute game. And in Detroit, they played a 20-minute game, arguably a 10-minute game. And then, overtime was super hit and miss. Peter Mrazek, someone I was very high on. I was very excited when we acquired him. He just looks like he's off. Goalies go through ruts just like players do. How long did it take Couturier to net 30 goals? He was stuck on 29 for what felt like months, but I realized it was only probably like 7 or 8 games. But, Mrazek looked bad and Lyon looked good, so I expect Lyon to get the start against the Rangers on Thursday, and if he plays well, then put him in net Sunday against Pittsburgh. You have a back-to-back coming up against Dallas and Colorado, so that would be the next time, unless Lyon does poorly against the Rangers. That would be the next time I think we would see Peter Mrazek is either against Dallas or Colorado. But it's getting close now. It's getting time where we can't throw these points away anymore. And that's what Detroit kind of felt like. That loss last night kind of felt like we were throwing points away. And can't be doing that at this point in the season. It's very important to keep going and to continue. And so with all of that said, I know I haven't been doing as much team analysis as I would even like, but I had something happen last night. For those of you that have followed me for a little bit and have at least been around since the beginning, I watch a lot of Broad Street Hockey Radio. I am a Patreon subscriber to them even, so I give them money and I get more stuff from them than even normal people do. I really like their analysis. I really like some of the things they say. Not that I necessarily agree with it all the time, but I think that it's done in a professional manner and I really enjoy it. And that's kind of what is inspired me to do this, because I think that, if you have intelligence like damn near everyone on that staff does, and you can, prove your point in statistics and in validity other than just yelling louder than the other person, which they do sometimes, but that's neither here nor there. I think you should be able to carve out your own niche in a role. And I was watching the post game that Bill Matz was doing last night, and I think he did a great job, especially considering it was a tough loss, and a lot of negativity can be had, especially after a loss and one that should not have occurred. There was a guy in the comments, and unfortunately, I I fed into it because that's the kind of person that I am. He was just downing Claude Giroux. He was saying Giroux's not a captain. He's not a clutch player. He's not blah, blah, blah. Like the list goes on and on. And if you're one of those people who thinks Claude Giroux is the problem of this team, you're an idiot. And I hate to say it that way, and I hate to come across that crass, but you're foolish. Claude Giroux is in the top 5 in points in the NHL right now at this moment, and he is second, tied with Jake Voracek in assists. So, I mean, you are literally foolish. If you believe that, if you honest to goodness believe Claude Giroux is the problem with this team, you don't understand hockey. You need to reevaluate how you evaluate players, because he is one of the lone bright spots for this team, especially when they were losing. In those games earlier in the season that I just talked about, where we were losing 2-1, 4-2, all that stuff, he had a goal and an assist in those games. He had 2 assists in those games. Last night he had 3 assists on 4 goals. Like, the guy can't do much more than what he's doing right now. And if you really and truly believe that he's the problem, you need to pick a different sport. So I wanted to break down that feeling and that opinion based on some statistics that I found. And I wanted to start from the beginning, the last Bobby Clark draft pick, and he nailed it. 8 players in the 2006 draft have been all-stars at various points in time, 9 counting Giroux, but we have Eric Johnson, Jordan Staal, Jonathan Toews, Nicholas Backstrom are in the first round as well. I want to throw that out there. So 9 players in the first round of that draft. Nicholas Backstrom, Phil Kessel, Kyle Okposo, Claude Giroux, Semyon Varlamov, and Nick Foligno. I'd take Claude Giroux over every single one of those players. The only one that's close, and the only one you could, in my mind, make an argument for would be Nicholas Backstrom. I think he's extremely underrated, but I mean, Claude Giroux is my guy. If I had to pick someone, I would take Backstrom. I think Toews has fallen off. Jordan Staal hasn't really been great since he left Pittsburgh. Eric Johnson's a good top 4 defenseman. Phil Kessel's a good accessory piece. Kyle Okposo, who cares? Semyon Varlamov is a decent goaltender. Nick Foligno's an okay player. Claude Giroux to me is an elite player. He wins faceoffs. He can play in every facet of the game. He's defensively sound. The comments that were being made about him upset me very much, and that's why we're going to focus on this stuff right now. And I decided to compare him to a player that is from the same draft and has what I would believe to be a similar skill set in Brad Marchand. And I hate Brad Marchand, but I acknowledge the fact that he is a very good player. He's a dirty player, but he's a very good player. So I'm going to compare him to Claude Giroux. But before we get into that, I want to continue on with the top 10 players in scoring in the NHL in the last 6 seasons. So in the last 6 seasons, these are the top 10 players in order, starting with number 1. Sidney Crosby, Patrick Kane, Alexander Ovechkin, Jamie Benn, Claude Giroux, Nicholas Backstrom, Jonathan Tavares, Tyler Seguin, Blake Wheeler, Phil Kessel. Claude Giroux is fifth behind Sidney Crosby, who is damn near guaranteed a spot in the Hall of Fame. Patrick Kane, who is one of the best playmakers in the game. Alexander Ovechkin, who is one of the best goal scorers in the modern generation, just scored his 602nd goal the other day. Jamie Benn, who is a diamond in the rough if there ever was one. Gritty, hard-nosed player, gets to the net, scores a lot of goals. And then Claude Giroux. He is in front of Tyler Seguin, a 2nd overall pick. Nick Backstrom, who, like I said, was taken in the same draft as him. Blake Wheeler, Phil Kessel. Teams that honestly have more around them. I don't know if Giroux has had a legitimate finisher with him on a wing since he's been in the NHL. He's never had, Crosby has a Malkin sometimes. Patrick Kane's getting feeds from Jonathan Toews, I'm sorry. Alexander Ovechkin getting passes from Nick Backstrom. Jamie Benn plays with Tyler Seguin. And, there's I don't know if he's had a guaranteed tonight. Like Scott Hartnell I wouldn't call him a sniper. He was a power forward and did very well on the power play, but he wasn't really a great even strength player. Jake Voracek doesn't really shoot the puck all that much. I mean, Konechny is the closest thing that you could argue right now, and Ghost are people that can put the puck in the net from damn near anywhere on the ice. But I don't think he's had a sniper. He hasn't had a Vladimir Tarasenko. He hasn't had a Ovechkin. He hasn't had a Malkin. He hasn't had a Kessel or a Hornquist, or, Crosby's had those players. And granted, again, Sidney Crosby is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer in the NHL. Like, as much as it pains me to say that, it's true. If you're arguing that Claude Giroux, who has more points than Sidney Crosby this year, is undervalued at his $8.75 million cap hit, you are foolish. Other notable players behind Giroux, who is 5th, Evgeny Malkin is 12th, Taylor Hall is 16th, Brad Marchand, who we'll talk about in a minute, is 18th, Jonathan Toews is 19th, Vladimir Tarasenko and Steven Stamkos 22nd and 23rd, respectively. So, I'd like to preface this with I'm going to get into the comparisons between Claude Giroux and Brad Marchand, and then I'll jump into some more Giroux stats just about where he sits all time for Flyers stuff that people may not know. I know they've been talking about it on the broadcast, and he just passed Eric Lindros. I'm wearing my Lindros tribute T-shirt right now. I went to that game, which was so much fun, but I don't know if people know where he stands other than that. So with one more season than Brad Marchand, Giroux has played 730 games and averages he's scored 662 points. Brad Marchand has played 591 games and has scored 449 points. So I didn't do the math, and I probably should have. So I'm going to do it right now. But while I'm doing it, I'm going to quickly state that Giroux has missed 10 games to injury in his entire career, which is, again, one more season than Marchand. And Marchand has played one full season. He's played one full season in his entire career. And Giroux actually has one more season with a playoff appearance, which is, again, something we'll get into in a moment. Giroux averages .906 points a game. So he's pretty close to averaging a point a game. Marchand is sitting at, make sure I do this the right way. I didn't. This is the problem with recording this live. .759. So .76, which is also very good. Very, very good. But he's not on the level Claude Giroux is. And take into account as well, Giroux had an awful season last season. So if he would have had the season that he normally does, where I don't know if we could have expected this level of productivity from him last year, where he's going to eclipse the 90-point plateau, hopefully. I don't know if we could have expected that, but I mean, you put him with 60, 70 points instead of the 42 or something that he had. You're talking about a different player. So one more full season and just scores a crap ton more points than Marchand, whereas and he stays relatively healthy. He's missed 10 games to injury. That's something that numbers don't tell you. But someone that suits up every night and plays through injuries and is there at practice, and I mean, that was a story that came out earlier this year that they told G, after I believe it was the All-Star game, he came back and they were like, "We're going to have practice. We want you to take a maintenance day." And he was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll do that." And then showed up to practice the next day, and they were like upset, but not upset, because that's what you want. You want your players to want to be in that locker room. You want your players to be there. He's a leader. And I hate the fact that he has a C on his sweater is what dictates, is what everyone thinks he needs to be, this vocal, insane presence. By that logic, Jonathan Toews needs to be that. Jonathan Tavares needs to be that. Steven Stamkos needs to be that. And they're not. Those players are not that guy. They're very subdued. When do you see Ovechkin yelling at players? When do you see Crosby yelling at players? When do you see anyone doing stuff like that? You don't, because that's not what a captain does. Honestly, the letters are overblown. It's a guy that is allowed to go talk to a referee. Let's not pull any punches other than that. It's a guy that when he's on the ice is allowed to go speak to the referee. He's a guy that's been in the league for a little bit. He's a guy that has respect around the league. That's it. That's what a captain does. If you're saying you need a letter on your sweater to be able to be a voice in that locker room, you're saying that Sean Couturier is not a voice in that locker room. You're saying Brian Elliott isn't a voice in that locker room. You're saying just it's ridiculous. It's not fair. And I just don't like how it's, take the C off of Giroux. Can we stop that now? The man in 63 playoff games has 62 points. He's a point per game player in the playoffs. In 72 playoff games, Brad Marchand has 43 points. Can we stop this guy? Brad Marchand is supposedly up for the Hart Trophy this year because of what all he does for Boston. He scored two seasons where he's had more than 30 goals. In comparing their styles and comparing the kind of players that they are, Giroux is head and shoulders a better player than Marchand and has been. So there is a little bias here, obviously, as a Flyers fan, but I mean, we're just looking at basic statistics. In 730 games, he scored 662 points. Marchand has 591 games, 449 points. That's a large discrepancy. That's a large disparity. In the playoffs, Giroux has played 9 less games and has 19 more points. I mean, it doesn't get more cut and dry than that. And to say that a guy isn't elite and a guy can't perform in the big time, the playoffs is the big time. He averages a point per game. And the last time he was in the playoffs, 2015, 2016, he only had an assist. So in 6 games that they played against the Rangers, I believe it was the Rangers or the Capitals. It was one of those two. I believe it was the Capitals. So in 6 games against the Capitals, he had 1 assist. 1. That's it. But that means that he was over a point a game a player before that. And he was playing injured. So I just don't understand where it comes from. I don't understand where to take the C away. I don't get it. I don't understand. This guy is 9th all time in games played in Flyers history. He's 13th in goals all time. He's 4th in assists all time, 5th in points all time, and should get to 4th passing Rick McLeish next season. He's 2nd in power play assists behind Bob Clark, and he's 29 assists. So he could conceivably take that spot over from Bobby Clark before he retires a Flyer, hopefully. I don't understand where the bias against Giroux comes in. He's made Couturier a 30 goal scorer this year. You look at Couturier's goals, I guarantee he's assisted on a good majority of them. I mean, what more could you look for? And the guy that was in the comments that I was kind of arguing with, and again, I shouldn't have done it, but I did. The guy that I was arguing with said he couldn't wait for Couturier or Patrick to get the C. 19-year-old Nolan Patrick and 25-year-old just having a breakout season for the first time 6 years in the league, Sean Couturier. So I'm all for the youth movement. I'm very excited. I actually want to talk about that a little bit because I don't have a lot of numbers in front of me, but I don't understand. With all of this information, I hope that maybe I changed some of your minds or at least made you think about it a little bit. But Claude Giroux will go down as one of the best players of this generation. He's going to go down as one of the top 5 players in the league when offense was hard to come by. Defenses, there's less goals scored than ever. Other than this season, goal scoring's been down, and he's up there with Patrick Kane, who could be in the Hall of Fame, and Sidney Crosby, who will be in the Hall of Fame, and Alexander Ovechkin, who will be in the Hall of Fame. It's just, how can you argue against the guy at this point? And he's got 87 points in 73 games. I don't get it. I don't understand. But that's all I really have for that. I just want to touch on a couple prospect players that I think are really interesting. Wade Allison, very interested in him. I believe he played for Western Michigan. Got injured. Shouldn't be anything career threatening. Shouldn't even change anything. He just needed to get surgery and rehab. I think he's going to be an interesting piece for the Flyers moving forward. For me, he's like a more skilled Scott Hartnell. Very excited about him. In the toughest division in NCAA hockey to score points, he averaged 1.36 points a game. So I'm real excited to see him. I'm excited to see Isaac Ratcliffe. The kid needs to grow into his body. He's like 6'5", 6'6". He plays wing. He scored 41 goals this year for the Gulf Storm. He just needs to grow into his frame and play with his body a little more. But I can see him being, a Wayne Simmons type. Hopefully, he skates well, puck handles fairly well, got a real good shot. And for me, the piece de la resistance of forwards is Morgan Frost. I'm super excited to see this kid. He's the first player actually in the Flyers system since Claude Giroux to score more than 110 points in the regular season. He finished the season with 112 in the Ontario Hockey League this year. And he was second in that scoring race. He scored 40 goals, had 72 assists. You can watch Morgan Frost highlights, and he's definitely going to be one to watch out for. When he grows into his frame, because he is a smaller guy, he's like 5'9", 5'10". But once he bulks up a little bit, puts a little bit of mass on, you watch out for him. Because if you have Sean Couturier, Nolan Patrick, Morgan Frost as your top three centers, that's going to be a dangerous lineup as long as we have the skill on the wings. And in seeing different players and whatnot, I do believe that we will. Obviously, we'll still have Jake. G will still be there. Maybe Simmons potentially, but we'll have the Ratcliffes of the world. The Albe Kubels. We'll have the we'll have random signings as well for wingers and whatnot. But it's going to be interesting. I'm very, very excited to see what happens with this team moving forward. And we're in a playoff push. Getting beat out by Columbus the other night for them to take over third in the Metro. We're in it. We're in the race. So it's just going to come down to the Flyers winning games, and they can't have those half-assed efforts like they had last night against Detroit. But yeah, guys, that's all I really have for you. Check out Wade Allison, Morgan Frost, Isaac Ratcliffe. Very excited about them. Carter Hart destroying every non-professional goaltender in NCAA hockey and in any non-professional amateur league. Definitely check him out as well. That's all I really have for you guys. Hopefully, the next time I come on, we'll be talking more about how well they did. And, there's 4 points waiting. Need them from New York, and it'd be really nice to steal one at least from Pittsburgh. So thank you guys so much for hanging out. Like I said, as always, like, subscribe, share, and definitely tell your friends. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns about the Flyers or any NHL team, just let me know, and I'd love to talk about it. So thank you guys again, and let's go Flyers.